How are we doing today? Lots of networking happening, I see. Okay. How are you, Baskar, sir?
Doing good. Absolutely.
I'm so happy to see you after the pandemic. I think it's been a very, very long time that I'm meeting you and meeting you in person. And really, oh, okay. So they brought this up. So I want to start with a complaint and a compliment. Complaint against my own partner team that has put this together. So they pulled up my picture, which is a 15-year-old picture from LinkedIn, and they've put up Baskar sir's picture, which is like very recent. But the point I'm trying to make is, in the last 15 years, I have put on 15 kilos, lost a lot of hair, had 2 dental fractures. But Baskar sir, who I've met in 2010 when I first joined Exchange for Media, he continues to remain the same in the picture, in person. And between the two of us, I don't even own a unicorn. So, Bhaskar, how do you do it? Compliments to you. Compliments to you. I want to start with something that I think, because while we're talking about a very heavy duty technology kind of theme, but I think the human aspect of technology founders is very important. And since I knew Amagi from a long time, I took the liberty, Baskar sir, to go behind your back. And I have some 20 numbers of Amagi employees currently and former employees. And I picked up the phone on some of them. And this is what I got to know. So one of the reasons why Baskar sir is like this, fit and absolutely fine, is because he pedals to work. And at one point in time, I don't know how many kilometers would you pedal to work from your office?
Typically, again, I'm trying to do it 100 kilometers a week is my target, and I've
Wow.
been continuing to do that.
Wow. Okay. And somebody even said, Bhaskar used to own a BMW, and then he would have those funny attachments with the cycle. He used to get a BMW to office. So, we had a hearty laugh about that. But the other aspects about you, sir, which came out in this whole conversation with multiple people, one of them was about when smart watches were introduced in India. And I got to know this very interesting story. And Bhaskar sir is going to basically make a lot of HR people lose their jobs, because what I got to know was he understood a little bit more about the smart watches syndrome, and called up the founder of that company and ordered some 200-300 smart watches for his entire team. And it didn't stop at that. They even went ahead and had their own private dashboard at the Amagi office. Am I right?
Yes, that's true.
And they would compete on a fitness level on that dashboard. So very beautiful things that I got to know, and many of these things from past employees. But the thing that touched my heart the most was that somebody mentioned, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs who have, Amagi has built a lot of entrepreneurs or supported a lot of entrepreneurs. So a lot of people who moved out of the Amagi space also mentioned that all the 3 co-founders, whenever they got to know that somebody is going their own path, the co-founders came to them and offered them any kind of help, whether it was funding, investment, or any kind of support required. So I think that's really special for any founders to do. So let's start on that very, very positive note.
Okay, thank you. You embarrassed me enough, I guess. But
that's my job, sir. I have to make it very awkward for you today. So coming to your website, it says in big bold letters, "It's all here." Okay, and I know it is more about the solutions that Amagi offers in a more the cloud space for M&E. But yesterday we had the chief minister speaking at our forum,
right,
and he spoke very highly of Bangalore and the startup capital and the changes that have happened.
Right.
Is it all here? You are headquartered here. So when it comes to technology, funding, talent, what is your opinion on this?
No, I think this is a fascinating city. And again, the city is obviously, and again, this is what I tell people, it's all for the climate. All of us came here assuming that Bangalore's climate is one of the best in the world that you can actually get, even aspire for. I think the Mumbaiites would never be able to do that for sure, right? So clearly that is, but I think over the last 20 years, and I've been an entrepreneur for the last 30 years now, almost. And one of the big changes that we've seen is it's a cauldron of innovation that's starting to happen. The reason why it's happening is fundamentally, if you look at it historically, we had government institutions in Bangalore, which in turn led to a lot of educational institutions that started really happening here. thanks to ISC and IIMs and a whole slew of technology and management institutes that came to the city. And then you had a bunch of new technology companies starting from Texas Instruments to a whole slew of companies. Then you had the IT revolution that happened here in terms of the services companies, which became big. I think what's happened over time is serendipitously, this particular city has the best of talent that you can never get anywhere across the globe, leave alone India, even across the globe, even in the Valley. I don't think the sort of the number of density of technology people that you can actually access has become extremely high. But interestingly, over the last 10, 15 years, if you look at it, this also has attracted a lot of capital. So quite a bit of venture capital firms coming in today. So suddenly you had ideas, you had people, and you had capital. And interestingly, in the last 10 years, you've seen our markets grow as well. So I think most startups in this country, if it's any BTC startup, their market would have been Koramangala, not Bangalore, Koramangala, right? Then a HSR layout is the next market. Next, you would go to the next. So there's the amount of innovation that consumers have adopted, because the young folks who came on board, they were not only innovating, but they were also kind of be ready for experimentation in terms of being good consumers. So they were lapping up all the innovations and the new creative things that were happening, which I think is super important as a startup for you to kind of, it's almost like a big lab. And this is what I've been kind of proposing is Bangalore is the largest innovation lab in the world. Everything is here for you to do things. That's the beauty of this space.
I think 3 cheers to our city, Dhamma Bengaluru. So yeah. So coming to Amagi, if one has to define what Amagi is, I'm an art student. So
right.
When you say, SaaS player, cloud solutions for cloud solutions for global M&E sector, but could you simplify what you and your team at Amagi do?
Absolutely. I think we do fairly simple things, and I'll kind of walk you through. If you look at it in the entertainment business of television and consuming content, we've seen what's called a Goldilocks condition happening. Goldilocks condition is a condition of perfect condition that happens in the industry. It happens once in a lifetime for some of the industries, 30, 40 years that happens. In the media industry, if you look at it, 4 things have come together very rapidly. One is, over the time, all of us have kind of experienced the amount of content has increased. The glut of content, very, very different creative genres have come in. So content quality, content quantity, and the dimensions that covers has exploded, number one. Thanks to production costs coming down, new people coming on board, a whole slew of things that have happened. And distribution of content has become democratized as well. If you look at our world of cable and satellite, we had very less amount of bandwidth. You had to work with the operators who actually had limited spectrum of what they can do. Internet connected devices suddenly blew that whole thing of distribution becoming very, very democratized, which is super important because you have content, now you have distribution mechanisms to go to anywhere you want. And from the YouTube era, where we saw YouTube as the only sort of choice, now we have so many different OTT choices that's come, not only in India, across the globe that's happened. That's the second thing that's happened. Third thing is audience have become global. People want to consume. I'm sure a lot of few folks are consuming Korean drama today in India. So that's a reality.
How many hands up?
Okay.
Okay, not to them. Okay.
So you're seeing that lot more globalization of content that's starting to happen. Right. And for all of this, at least in the world that we live in, where our markets are today, US and Europe and other places, the television advertising dollars which existed is moving into streaming television in a big way, fundamental big way. For example, in the US, $70 billion gets spent on advertising in television. Today on connected television, or what we call smart TV in an Indian context, is actually about almost $20 billion. So big moment happening there. If you look at it, this is a very fundamental change that is starting in the industry. Nothing to do with Amagi, just what's happening. Just that we've been in the right place, right time, providing what I call the picks and shovels, or the tools for these businesses to be able to transport their content between a content creator to the distributor, monetize the content because we connect with them with the advertising part of the business, and be able to bring that content globally. That means we enable this whole thing. So everything else existed. Content existed, audiences existed, distribution platforms existed, money was there. We are the only technology partner who fit into that whole ecosystem, providing a platform through which, if you're a content creator using a browser and nothing else, you don't need to know technology, but can you just drag and drop your content and go to the world, distribute it, understand the analytics of what's happening, monetize the whole content, bring back the money. That's the exact platform that we really built.
So you fit into that puzzle very
We
well.
fit into the puzzle. Again, we've been lucky to be in the right place, right time. That's important as well. So it's not about yes, technology is complex and all of that, but we simplify this whole process for content owners and the platforms to work with us. That's what we do.
So, even the name Amagi has a very interesting backstory, isn't it? And there's also this whole story about how all three of you met as co-founders. How can you just run us through a little bit about those initial days?
Yeah.
How did the name Amagi come up? What does it mean?
So Amagi stands for freedom in Sumerian.
Okay.
Again, it's actually the root word is Amma, right? Amma is mother, right?
Right.
So Amagi in Sumerian is go back to your mother. So it's when slavery was big, dominant in that society, they were actually freeing the slaves, and that's the reason Amagi came in. Amagi is go back to your mother or motherland.
Okay.
And freedom is a value that we espouse as a company, and that's something that was close to our hearts as founders. We wanted to really do that. Obviously, this Japanese sounding name, it made a lot of we love Japanese culture. We kind of done business in Japan a lot, so it sort of helped us to kind of take that name. Obviously, website existed, so it was actually good for us to have that. And when we started, again, three of us, I remember, we started in targeted advertising. As you remember, we were a more targeted advertising business for India. That's where we started that whole business. And we started, I remember, we were kind of debating in a park here in JP Nagar in Bangalore. So we were sitting in a park, and then we were actually discussing what we want to do as the next step. Right? This is on a Monday morning that we were actually discussing this. So one small boy walked up in the middle of the conversation, he stopped us and said, "Can I tell you a future?" He said, "I'm a palmist person. I can actually see your hand and then talk about future." We were kind of furiously debating what we want to do. And I said, no, don't, we don't need it. I told the boy, and then the boy left. But that struck a very important chord for us. This boy could identify that somebody sitting in a park on a Monday morning at 11:30 a.m. is typically jobless. And if it's jobless, for sure, they need to know their future. Something's wrong. So that attracted us saying, hey, think about it. You need to target your consumers where they are. And that boy knew exactly that, hey, if somebody in a park on Monday morning is really jobless, and young people, clearly there's a problem with their future, and I can get a good customer. So that kind of triggered a conversation. And then we started thinking about targeting and targeted advertising and technologies. And that's sort of been a great part of our business. And that is a really nice time to that's the way we kickstarted the whole targeted advertising space.
Do you ever go back to that park, find that boy, and say thank you?
No, not yet, actually. We're
Not
figuring
yet.
out.
Okay. What an interesting story. But you're also, I think you studied together.
Yeah, all the three of us co-founders, we're Srini, Vidya, and myself are the three
Right.
co-founders. We are classmates in college. And we've been together for the last 30 years together as founders.
Very nice. Okay. Coming to our theme today, streaming is the new TV, right? So implications for the M&E sector. Is streaming the new TV? What is, why are we calling it the new TV? I know you touched a little about it in the previous comments, but how for our audience would you say, is it different from cable and satellite? And as somebody who has been, you yourself mentioned you've been an entrepreneur and in the media and entertainment space for the last 3 decades, how do you see this change? How do you see how is the landscape changing? I know you spoke a little about it, but what are, say, the 3-4 key aspects, and not just in streaming, of course, that's
Right.
the main core
Right.
question, but something on the periphery also that has changed drastically, which will have impact and implications here.
Okay, let me go back to the whole thing, right? So if you look at it, again, the way we start, and again, the genesis that we all start with is saying, if you look at it, storytelling is timeless.
Yeah.
All of us love to hear stories, want to talk about storytelling. So storytelling is a timeless art in some sense. Video is a great way to consume that story. That's something that we've seen as the biggest part of the whole equation. Now, if you look at it in the early days of when television existed, how do you do mass broadcasting of content? Obviously, we had to use the radio waves and others to really reach our homes, the antennas that we used to have with the Doordarshan and others, right? Over time, obviously, people figured out that they can use satellites to bring to home, channels to home, as well as cable which actually came to our house. So that is the way that television existed for all of us. In that world of television, the challenge was in terms of the pipes that were coming to our houses were limited to what you can actually transmit in the pipes. That pretty much limited the content consumption and what we could actually watch. With the internet happening, and I think we've all been waiting for this to happen for the last tens of years, right? At least I know it's from 2005, 6, we thought internet will come, IP streaming will become, but transferring video on internet was a big challenge because the bit rate was very, very low, the bandwidth was very low. Over time, it's become better and better in terms of the consumption patterns. Where are we today and across the globe is now the bandwidth across the internet is today extremely good enough for all our video consumption that's starting to happen. What is this predominantly? Why is this technology interesting or unique? It's not because the pipe has become democratized. It's an infinite set of things that you can actually watch. Second, this allows us to personalize not only advertising, but also content for each one of us. These are fundamental changes in terms of the consumption patterns. And if you ally it with multiple devices through which we are actually accessing content, the whole multi-screen environment is driving a new change in terms of we are all becoming personal consumers of some fashion. Not really, it used to be a family-oriented one box, one television set, to all of us having our own mobile devices and iPads and others that we're trying to do. Truly, we are at the cusp of another change that's starting to happen, which is the change of an immersive viewership that's starting to happen. The way we foresee and the way what we're seeing is all about gaming, the metaverse that we talked about, and the television viewing and the movie viewing experiences are going to change dramatically. It'll take them up maybe 2-3 years before we see that sort of the spectrum of what the growth of change that's going to happen. It is happening because consumers want to get to what is television starting to transform into is to fool you from the reality of what you are. So bring you into a new world and be able to bring that emotions. That's the future of how we see this whole thing. In this whole bargain, the streaming concept, the idea of that we have internet connected mechanisms to access content is the core foundation on which all of these new technologies are getting built. And that's where we work on fundamentally. And we're in a very early phase of the business and the company and the market where we're trying to do, but I think long way to go from there.
Sure. And while you, spoke a little about consumer attitude or behavior to this new change, I mean, we are being experimentative, we are changing how we perceive or consume content. I just, again, want to ask this question from a B2B and a B2C perspective. Are we also risk takers in India? Are we taking these bets? You work with a lot of brands, with a lot of broadcasters. What is their perception of, because this technology, of course, is helping them, but are they willing to bet big dollars? For a long time, your markets have been also the global partners, not so much India.
Correct.
So now is there, I mean, what is your comment on it today?
No, I think today markets better than where they were 2 years back. So again, just to give you, to even today, 85% of our revenues comes from the US.
Okay.
And the market there is accelerating for us, continuing to accelerate. And then we're seeing Europe. And then again, this is akin to a lot of technologies across the globe that's happened. Is fundamentally happens in the US context, then goes to Europe in 2 years, and then from 2 years to Asia. That happens. But generally, in a country like ours, given technologies of 4G and possibly 5G tomorrow, and with what's happening with internet penetration, there could be a leapfrog that can happen, which is continuing to happen. We see that actually from a video consumption standpoint. The biggest challenge in our country today is not bandwidth. I'm sure if you go to any OTT shows across any platforms, question was always people have low cost mobile devices, they don't have access to bandwidth. These were the challenges initially. I don't think people will be talking about it today because a lot of changes have happened, right? In terms of the 4G connectivity that's happened to stuff. Today, the challenge is really monetization. Do we have enough money, either subscription money or advertising money that's flowing into this whole business so that they can actually flow the thing, which is what we see contrary to what we see in the US or in the European context, where television advertising money is moving to connected and streaming television models. That in a big way is not started. Obviously, for example, I don't know if we've seen the announcement that YouTube did $1 billion in India, for example. So we're seeing that dramatic change happening. But we need to see that change accelerate as we see that. Because commensurate to the amount of viewership that we're having in digital, for example, I don't think we have the pricing and the advertising dollars moving in enough. that's the change we anticipate in the next 18 months that's starting to happen in the country. And that'll be an exciting time for all of us. Yeah.
I was going to ask you how long it's going to take. You already answered
Right.
that. So, speaking about Amagi's, the successful, you actually make a great business case for a successful pivot from targeted advertising to what you're doing today. You are in the business of media tech. You're a technology company. You started very young, and you even mentioned that you had your first startup in 11th grade.
In my 11th grade, yes.
Wow. Okay. What was that startup called?
That was called Arvam at that point of time. It's a small company that we started along with it's a boyish dream of starting some software company at 11 in a small tier 2 town called Coimbatore. So it was like, yeah, it was fun, but yeah,
Okay.
we did some financial software at that point of time.
Acha, okay. So you started your first startup in the 11th grade. You are now, on this whole path of this whole media tech space. Do you sometimes worry? Do you have sleepless nights about maybe another bunch of 3 20-year-olds, 16-year-olds coming up with technology that will disrupt your business?
That's the reality that we have to agree on. Right? So that's the rule of nature. So you cannot really beat the rule of nature. I'm sure there are some more people in a garage, young people who are trying to believe as well as kind of dream of the next generation of how this whole things are going to evolve. That's the reality of this world. I think we should first agree to that. And I think as maturity happens, that's important. Having said that, the only way I keep myself young is to kind of work with them, learn from a lot of new startups of what's happening, and keep tab of what's happening and being able to contribute to that whole journey to some extent. But the reality is, you will always see innovations come from the younger generations. That's going to continue to happen. And we need to keep ourselves updated, and that's the only way to do that.
Sure. A connected question, and this comes from my personal background of being more on the revenue and the sales side. A lot of technology companies and a lot of technology founders that we work with, there is an initial hesitation. They're so obsessed with their technology, with their solution, with their offering to the world outside, that perhaps, and I don't know, I would not generalize and say all of them,
Okay.
but the focus on making that big noise. And I come from media and marketing. So, we believe in making a big noise about any good thing. So, but technology founders, they focus so much on the product that marketing and advertising and making this big noise about the product somewhere is considered maybe secondary. Why so?
Okay, not really. Again, I don't know. I like what he's saying. Maybe it's a generalized comment.
Why so for Amagi?
Okay. For Amagi. So see, Amagi, a couple of things, right? One is we are in a B2B space, business to business. Obviously, we want to be able to talk to our customers in the most cost-efficient fashion to our customers. So we not being on a publication for a general public, ours will look like mumbo jumbo because it doesn't make sense. You don't need to know it. And we as a company, and again, from a DNA standpoint as founders as well, are people who are slightly antisocial. And you'll not see us much on LinkedIn and tweets and Twitters. I don't think, for example, that's what I tell my marketing team as well. We don't need to have opinions on everything. Just because we are successful in one domain doesn't mean you should have opinions on everything in the whole world. We don't exist for that. So we're fairly kind of very focused on the value that we create for our customers. In the customer ecosystem, we want to be obviously known as companies which can actually work with them fundamentally. So because it's B2B, the needs are also very different fundamentally, right, from a technology standpoint. Maybe it's B2C, it's a very different ballgame altogether. But B2B, we are talking to a particular set of customers who potentially need to know what we do. And those conversations are very niche. And possibly the publications, the medium through which we access them is also very, very specific to that particular discipline. In our case, I don't know about others, but yeah. Right.
Sure. And in the case of Amagi, I've heard very positive stories about you wanting to keep the profitability level high, but maybe, go frugal on the advertising bit so much. That's how you.
I wouldn't kind of call it as to, okay. That's not because, we don't need to spend on advertising.
I'm putting you on the spot here, sorry.
No, not truly. No, but I don't think, again, eventually you need to look at the ROI of the business. And again, we truly like to be profitable as a company. And again, doesn't matter because we don't really believe in valuations. We believe in customer revenues. And I told all my people, employees, and everybody that, hey, it's not about the valuations. It's all about customers value that we can provide. I would love to see the day when we do $1 billion of revenue from our customers, which is much more a great compelling milestone than all of this, right? So that's the way we see it as a perspective wise.
Baskar sir, you know, it's very difficult to get into the IITs, but you got into IIT Bombay and then you quit the course midway. May I ask why?
Long answer, but okay.
We have lots of time. We would like to listen to your answer.
No. Fundamentally, if you look at it, then again, my entrepreneurship journey, as I told you, was starting in my 11th grade. When in college, I remember, I think in my third year, when I opened a magazine called Byte Magazine. In those days, there's something called BYT, Byte Magazine used to exist. So again, internet didn't exist in those days as much. So when I looked at the cover of the magazine, it had Bill Gates and said Windows 95 is going to get launched. And that was a beautiful moment because my first love is software. So it's like software, and software can actually eat the world and actually get things done. I think Bill Gates was kind of demonstrating that. That was the day I decided that all my life is going to be in entrepreneurship and not really go to a company to work. So literally kind of decided that will not work, right? Having said that, and again, post my college, then went to, when IIT Bombay happened, the problem was two things. And again, something that I think even today, a lot of people come to colleges because they want to get grades. Because they want to get grades because they need to get employed. For me, there was no restriction of employment. Or at least in my mind, it didn't matter at all, right? Fundamentally. So I had come in fundamentally to say, can I learn new things? Can I just explore? Can I do things? The challenge was most of the courses that I wanted was actually completely, nobody was existing because everybody wanted grades and they thought these professors don't give grades. Henceforth, they didn't even join those courses. So professors said, we cannot take those courses for you because it's only one person coming for a course. Doesn't make sense. I spent about 3-4 months trying to figure out whether I want to do it. Then I'm always a self-learner in life. So to that extent, I said, this is not it is, packed my bags, came back, started my first company, and then went on. So that's all happened. So again, I don't think it was very conscious choices, but it didn't make sense. And again, more so today, I think I tell my children, maybe education doesn't make sense to go to college, actually. Because work environments, internet, you have so much of information. Because I thought school's not really relevant in these days. They should be learning new things and new things and agree. So some of the foundational fundamental stuffs can actually be done at home with the internet and a whole lot of things. And so I'm not a big believer in education per se, but again, that doesn't mean it's wrong or right, but as much as my beliefs fundamentally different.
While you started your first startup in 11th grade, today the whole startups, and I think at that point the word startup perhaps didn't even exist.
No.
So, but today startup and the whole startup economy, and there's so much noise around it, and especially in the last few months, with to address the elephant in the room, there is the layoffs and the funding crunch and the open battles between founders and investors. What would your advice be to two sets of people? One, startup founders who want to be, make companies like yours, and two, professionals like me, perhaps, who want to work also with startups. What would your advice be?
Age-old advice of business has not changed. Eventually, you want to create value for others who can perceive value and possibly pay for it because you need to kind of sustain that value and then grow that value. So I think that's not changed from a founder. It doesn't matter technology, otherwise, the core of the business exists, same thing. I think to some extent, money, or maybe what I would call lots of money, is corrupting the way we are looking at this whole ecosystem. Core value of the business has to be first demonstrated and proven at a particular point. I'm not against losses, or we shouldn't do losses or anything like that, but do we have the basic unit economics of some of these businesses clarified and built out before we kind of have more and more money coming in? Because again, if you look at it, no fault with any investors are wanting to put money, take money back. But as entrepreneurs, it's a huge responsibility in terms of being able to create something of value over time. So it's important to kind of understand that, bring back the foundations of, hey, why am I doing it? Do I have customers? Do I have the unit economics that will work for that particular customer and make it happen? I think going back to the basics will always help in some sense. That's important for us, because valuation is not the end goal. It's really the creation of the institution or the company that you're building is much more important and a larger milestone. rather than trying to worry about valuation, because valuations change every day. So it doesn't make sense. It could go down, it could go up. It depends on the sentiments, perceptions, all sorts of things. The core value of the company cannot change. That is what you're trying to do. So being hunkering down on basics and possibly not the most romantic things that you look at, but really the core value of every day's business is much more valuable and important. That's what I would tell the entrepreneurs. People who are wanting to join this startup, I think, see, India is a vibrant community of people who want to change things. And I think that's a beautiful thing, right? So if you look at it, I kind of respect a lot of entrepreneurs, young folks coming in, trying to change the businesses, change our perceptions about creating new value, for example. Please help them, because as people with experiences, all of you as professionals can actually help these people to create. Because what do founders bring in? Founders bring in audacious goals. They bring in the ability to imagine things. But execution is a different ballgame. There is a lot of people needed, a lot of good people who can actually feel passionate about the same goal and be able to do that. And that, I think, is an ecosystem of professionals who can actually drive that change. So that support structure is super important for success of any company. Right?
So when you are hiring folks, what do you look for in, say, the Amagi hiring process? Is there a special microscope that you make your set of people go through? Is there some special, the X factors? What are those for you?
Again, as a company, if you look at it, again, touchwood, we've had the lowest attrition in the industry. And the reason why it happened, because the reason what happened, and again, the reason, again, a lot of us work for the last maybe 10, 15 years in our company, people have stayed long, right? So we're all good friends pretty much, right? So that's the way the company's been grown. The reason why it happened, and again, if you go back, some of the principles, core principles that the company really espouses. So there are core principles that we look for from our employees as well as from our potential employees as well. First is, if you look at it, the company lives on what we call the vulnerability principle. Vulnerability is a kind of a weak in English language, but for us, it's a strength as a company. Why do we think it's strength? Is because we like people who are comfortable to be vulnerable with each other. The idea is, hey, you don't know. Hey, I didn't do this wrong. This is a mistake. We did things. We love to have those conversations and be able to take it up and not judge people around and do that. So we always look for people who have that humility in them to have that context in doing it and being able to work through that. That's an important trait that we look for all our teams and leaderships and people that we really hire. That's an important aspect for us, right? The humility comes very important. Respect for all people. So in a company, we don't, again, it's a cliche term, not having hierarchy, but we don't really believe that respect is through meritocracy and what you bring in. For example, in our company, I think the first person people get introduced to is a person called Shardama, who actually does tea for us. The reason why it is not because she's the most important person for all of us, because that tea is such an important part of it, right? So everybody first says, hey, you should, who are you should know her because it's important for you to do that. And that's important for us because that's the respect. Again, I have taken, again, this is an example of what I've done is basically how they treat. So Shardama brings tea for you in an interview. How you deal with her actually determines your interview status. And we've taken that actually. I have taken a call that somebody does not say a thank you, kind of keep it and go away. That's for me a sign that you're not respecting people, will not take you. So it's super important for us that respect for all and dignity of what we do is important. So that drives a lot of the cultural elements of the company itself and what we try to do.
Very nice, sir. Having worked with so many global partners, what are the key learnings or trends that you could comment on in the space today?
I think it's an exciting space in terms of the media business itself. And I'm sure a lot of you are looking at Netflix and the new results that's happening and a whole slew of things happening in this industry, right? This industry is going through a whole metamorphosis, if you will. This happens every 25, 30 years when you see the business change. In the television industry, if you look at it, first was the era of antennas and Doordarshan and others. Then suddenly cable TV happened. Iraq war happened in India and then cable TV release happened. Star came along and the whole history was different. That happened in every country. If you look at it, this particular change happened. Then we saw the DTH revolution, which kind of built in more and more reach for consumers. For example. Then we see the 4G revolution that kind of brought in video and content to every home and every device fundamentally. So what I think is a change that's happening right now is the whole democratization. All of this is coming together in some sense. And that is, if you look at it in the US context of where we are, for example. So for us, the biggest markets, LA and New York, where most of our teams and where we see, right? The amount of innovation and creativity that's happening in this industry is extremely mind-boggling in terms of that's one thing that I miss in India to some extent, right? The ability to bet and say, okay, let's go do this, try this. The amount of trials of things that people do in terms of innovation. And that's the reason it's very, very kind of conducive for us, where we also can kind of bet and actually do things. That's been a great change for us that's happening. And that's a very, very unique cultural element that I think we should learn as a society, as a country, where we're able to create new things. Don't be fear. See, fear is something that we should remove from the whole ecosystem and be able to play this game in a much, much larger spectrum of things. Only then innovation happens. That's what we're learning through the process of what we do today, right? Love to see that as a big change. More than any specific technology, that the whole mindset change can make a huge difference. I think at least Bangalore has that mentality. If we can bring it across the country, we can bring that up, because it's not about money. We have a lot of money in this country. Quite a bit of things can be done. It's a question of that culture of innovating, betting, and doing things fundamentally is important.
So a lot of, because you're in the business of content and distribution, there's a lot of, chitter chatter about content regulation. There's so many new things coming up every day. What is your comment on that?
If you look at it, historically, television was a regulated industry. The reason was basically it was a broadcast medium. It reached every consumer, everybody in some sense. It made sense. If you look at it, obviously you want to, because there was no control on the last final device where people were consuming content. It made sense to kind of bring in regulations which helped. Obviously, different countries have different leanings in terms of the structure of regulations, both either culturally driven or politically driven, but things that actually drive those cultural needs, for example. In a world where we are talking about individual connectivity in terms of content consumption, for example, to some extent, it starts treading into the space of, in a common good, we can understand the regulation being a broader space. But in an individual rights that I can have in terms of consuming, what do I believe that I need to consume? And if I can that consumption happen without an intervention from a regulation standpoint is something that we need to start thinking through fundamentally. Having said that, I think because it's going to be as big or bigger than television itself, because it's the new television that's happening, you will see regulations following through. Already there are regulations in multiple countries. Regulations always follow innovation. So innovation happens, regulation comes along, and regulations are always good in terms of putting the right brakes in the systems, because sometimes unbridled innovations can actually go awry. Some regulations will help. What are those? In a new world, you don't want to apply the same old regulations of the television industry, but kind of bring in a new set of regulations which is more driven by the current needs of the market is super important.
In terms of what's next for Amagi as a company, what do you, because you've already had one major pivot, is there something else on the horizon that we as followers of Amagi perhaps don't know or haven't seen?
No, I'm of the strong view that we have to pretty much cut our limbs every time to grow further on, right? So it's like, the reason is basically you have to disrupt yourself. If you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else will disrupt you. So the conversations I have inside my company is always saying, hey, what products of ours can we compete against ourselves? Can we kind of break this, create new ones? The reason why it's important is if we don't continue to do that ourselves, somebody else is going to do it. So that's the reality of how we see this whole business. The second part is, we tell our companies, it is not about a one-time vision of something that you're trying to do or a crystal ball, saying, hey, this is a crystal ball, we understand what it is, and we do that. We have a fairly straightforward formula because we are trying to build this company for the next 25 years. We're trying to build an institution. Incidentally, we've started with some of these technologies. We'll continue to do that. How can we build timeless enterprises, which have nothing to do with founders or anybody, right? How can this company actually go on forever in a set of core value systems that we can espouse and a set of processes through which we do things? So one of the things we've come is a 4-step process in our system. Simple, it's been no rocket science. We say, hey, how can we listen to our customers the best? How do we extract that whole customer needs into a product conceptualization? How fast can we take that product consolidation and build a product? And how best in superlative can we actually get our customer experience for them? and do it again and again and again repeatedly. So we're not looking at some crystal ball saying, oh, this is going to, we're not trying to bet anything. We are saying we listen to our customers, effectively take that and be able to build the products that we need and be able to deliver it back and do that repeatedly in a very, very consistent fashion. Can we do this for the next 20 years? Absolutely, yes. Because this is the only formula which doesn't bet on whether my guess is right or wrong. I don't need to guess it because a lot of things don't change and customers in the forefront. That is the core formula that we're really building. We're not yet there, but that's the whole process. Because as founders, we think we want to be what I call clock builders and not timekeepers. And I'm sure, I think for the audience of people, that clock builders are people who build a clock and put so that you can watch, you can look at the time there. Timekeepers are people who have a watch, and every time you need to talk to, anytime you need time, you come to that particular person. We want to remove the person out of this whole picture and say, let's build clocks which are forever and timeless, and none of us need to exist from an institution standpoint.
I remember Girish Matrabhutam because he's such a big name in the whole space. But I think that one line that he said was, don't sell, solve. If you solve for a customer, you know what's your future, where you're going next. So yeah, I think you're operating on the same philosophy. While we're talking about philosophy and alignment with customers, it's also alignment with investors. How do you choose who you partner with? Is there, I mean, like you had this whole set of, tick marks or check boxes for hiring people, and investors are also people who are investing so much in your company. So how do you select who you go ahead with?
Again, a very similar set of process that we follow, right? And again, see, first thing is to empathize that they are a business. Every venture capital or private equity today is a business in themselves. What are they doing? They're raising money from somebody else to invest in these companies and actually make money eventually through the process. So the realization that they are in a business of investing money and wanting to make money is super important. So we actually make that as a very, very important part of the conversation. In fact, I tell them, what is your expectation out of this whole thing? Because you're investing in a company, what are you expecting? That's number one. Number two, we obviously...
At what stage, sir, do you do that?
Typically, when we start an engagement which is serious enough, most of the time, in fact, again, I have a secret. I have what's called my board document. I have an FAQ for my board. When somebody acts as a board member, they come join our investment. The first thing I send them a document saying, hey, this is what we are. This is the way we will behave. This is the way we will interact. And you need to be comfortable with us as individuals. And again, the same vulnerability principle I talked about. This is what I tell my investors. We want to be vulnerable with you. I want to be able to tell you that I don't know. I am failing. We don't know how to solve this problem. We want to have that comfort that you're not judging us every time, but you feel the trust levels when you come in. Because I tell them, you are only coming with the trust level. You trust us 100%, come in. We will not know every answer in the way, but we will work through it. That's the guarantee that we do. Fundamentally, it's the working through. If you trust that, come along. Don't come in assuming that the market size is big or product is great. It can change. It can evolve. So that's a conversation we have. And most of our investors who come in also love that sort of a comfort that they come in. If people are not comfortable, we tell them, don't do this. Because in fact, I tell people whenever they put a term sheet, the first thing I'm saying, are you 100% clear that you want to do this? Because it's easy to grab the term sheet and get things done. But to say 100%, are you clear? If somebody's saying, you have 90% commitment in terms of what you think is important, don't do this. It's okay not to do it, but have that 100% commitment. I think we've been extremely fortunate to have great investors who kind of espouse that value, come in with long-term perspective. We have seen good times, bad times, and we'll, I'm sure, continue to see good times and bad times in the future as well. So I tell my investors the journey. And for us, journey is the destination. There's no big destination. For them, obviously, they have to get out of the bus at some point in time. For us, the bus goes on, literally, right? So these are the stuff that we really look forward to with our investors.
Nice. My last question is on talent, because I was in and out before our session, and I could hear somebody else talking about, upskilling and people from Hubli and the smaller towns. And I'm a small town girl. I'm from Belgaum, Belgavi Hudgi. So, and Belgaum is known for engineering colleges and all of that. So, but what do you, you're a very niche kind of technology. Do you have the right set of people in India who can understand this? And do you see some kind of gaps in our educational system? You're wanting to hire somebody and he comes with a certain degree or qualification. Do you see a little bit of a gap, or is it something that, you hire and then you train them for?
No, it's been a mixed part of it. I come from Coimbatore, which is a small town as well. So I think we all come from a sensitivity of wanting to see what is the advantage of India is talent of people who are moldable to specific skill sets that we have. What we miss in the country is our education system not able to mold them to what it is, right? Again, most of our institutions are, see, again, this is what I tell people, right? What do we need in a 4-year college or a 3-year college that you go to is the ability to know how to learn. Learn how to learn. That's the most important thing that we really look at. And we see that as the biggest challenge. Today, our ecosystem doesn't allow that. So people don't know how to learn because they think I've learned and then I'm coming in. It's a lifelong journey of learning. And that's one of the biggest challenges for us. So what we do is we do a mix of things. We are hiring across the globe. For example, I'm setting up my first office in Eastern Europe, where we're actually starting to look at a talent base there, for example. So you're going to have this mix of what I call cross-pollination of talent as well, which makes a huge difference. And people know that how other countries have evolved, what have they done, and strong foundations and how it works, right? But a learning culture is important. And that's something that we put as a foundation stuff. When we hire fresh out of college, this is the first thing I tell them. It's a lab, it's an innovation center, not a company. You have to learn, bring your textbooks back. You have to be for that and actually do that. So don't assume that, oh, I'm come to work and then my life is completely different. No, it's actually a continuation of what you're doing. So the learning culture is important. That's what we bring along.
Very nice. So, Baskar, sir, you really don't look like Janvi Kapoor or Sara Ali Khan, and I don't look like Karan Johar. But I thought we'll do a little bit of a fun rapid fire, just to end our long conversation. But these are some of the questions I have for you. Work from home, work from office, work in hybrid mode. What is your choice?
Hybrid.
Okay. Please complete this sentence. Women in technology, and your wife is one of the co-founders, so, heads off, but women in technology need a more level playing field. We need more of them, and they make tech more humane. Which of these?
No, I think they bring in an entirely different perspective, and it's super important for us as a company or even as a society to bring in diversity. We truly believe, and again, my wife is a co-founder and she's been an entrepreneur before that as well. And we've been together, and the perspectives that she brings in. And again, one of the things she always tells me is, hey, don't talk about level playing fields, because it's pretty much, she feels that, hey, we are trying to make it an inferior gender, which it's not, literally, in that sense, right? So the question we always kind of debate about is saying, hey, how do we bring in those perspectives and in terms of leadership and be able to do things? I think we've been lucky that we've been able to do that together. But I think this is super important for us, and we really think a lot about it and how do we bring that perspective into our company as well. Right?
Sure. I think Vidya's startup was called Impulsoft.
Yes, that's the same as ours.
Okay.
So all of us together. So
Okay.
we were entrepreneurs together and then married, but yeah,
Okay.
we entrepreneurs first and then.
Nice. The other compliment that I did not mention about right in the beginning was one of his former employees, called Baskar Saab an undercover feminist. He said, if you enter our office, the new space, there are a lot of murals, and much of them have something to do with gender and that whole Amagi, freedom, gender kind of, it gives you that kind of sense. So, lots of compliments for you, sir. Entrepreneurship. Are you born with those genes? You become one after that bad fight with your boss, or you become one when you meet the right partners? What would your choice be?
It's a mix of the 1 and 3. 2, I wouldn't recommend you become an entrepreneur because of that. But 1 and 3 is a mix of both. And again, I truly believe sometimes risk taking is something that has to be in it. It's very hard to kind of do that. And obviously, you need the right partners. Without this, I think it's a journey which is lonely. So you need the right set of partners to go through that whole journey.
Right, nice. In order of priority, the 3 qualities you look for while hiring people: patience, hunger, or educational background and work experience?
Number 3, we don't even look at. I don't think we matter for us as much. Okay. Really. So it's really about hunger for us is the first thing. And obviously followed by patience, because hunger is super important in terms of what you want to. The curiosity you bring in is important.
Sure. Bangalore as a startup capital needs better infra, better investment, better risk takers.
I think number one is infrastructure. If you can get it, I think all others are existing already.
Okay, okay. An Indian tech leader that you admire the most?
Not really. I've not thought about that as much, actually, truly. But I truly believe the Tatas and what they've done. Always, I feel that when you look at Ratan Tata and what they've done, I think in a longer term, if you're trying to build a 100+ year company, the sort of the decision making and the sort of things that they've brought on board is something that we would like to emulate as a company, right? And that's something that we look forward to do that.
Okay. Somebody from foreign shores?
No, I started, as I told you, with Bill Gates' my stuff. But
Okay,
again, obviously
okay.
things have changed a lot in some
Right.
sense, but I continue to kind of keep that. So I have my childlike curiosity. So my memory is stuck there and I've not changed a lot.
Okay, okay. Since you're in the business of streaming, what was the last OTT series that you would have binged on?
I'm a Tamilian, so I've actually watched Suel. I don't know whether you've heard of that. But
Yes,
that's
we
what I
have.
watched.
Yes, lovely. And this is like the last question. It's a $1 billion question because I'm asking it on behalf of my boss. Every time he comes to Bangalore, he's asking me this question. So, which is your favorite South Indian joint in Bangalore? Anup sir, you would agree with me every time he asks us this question.
No, I do go to MTR, but yeah,
Okay.
again, I don't know, depending on people, but MTR is mine at least.
Okay. Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for this chat, Baskar Saab. I think I'll leave it open if there are some audience questions. So you raised your hand. Anup Saab is right here.
A couple of questions. One is, my name is Anup, and I've spent a large part of my professional journey in linear television.
Okay.
So what I'm interested in knowing is, as I take a back seat, is will linear television die? And I'm asking this question because we are around 300 million households, and satellite and cable is still around 210 million. We, being in the business, we always think that there is a lot of headroom for growth as far as satellite and cable is concerned. That's the learning that we've had. But streaming is still confined to 8 crore people, right? And we still have 130 or 150 crore people. So that's still a long way to go. So my question is, will linear television die? The second question that I wanted to know is, you did speak about advertising moving from linear to digital over a period of time. But in digital, the numbers that come out are self numbers, are numbers that they claim, each of the platform players or the domain claims. But whereas in television, you have a third-party monitoring system. So how authentic or genuine are these numbers is still, there is no validity for that. So in such a scenario, in such a kind of a system, is it right for us to say that India will quickly move from this traditional linear advertising to digital advertising as we think? So because of the lack of third-party monitoring that we still have. These are two questions.
Great, thanks for that. Actually, the first question is linear TV. Again, let me delineate two things, Anup. And again, this is our experiences across the globe. So, linear television is the concept of viewer watching it in a linear fashion is different from the pipes through which they watch. And I'm trying to delineate this just from an example standpoint. And the reason is, in India, you're absolutely right. So, cable and satellite is going to live for the next 10, 15 years. Nothing changes rapidly. It's a narrative that's changing, not the real data, and the population is continuing to have that concept will exist. And we are seeing this across the globe as well. It's not going to change in one day or it will take more than a decade before that change happens. Having said that, the more important thing to kind of realize is this is exactly like what happened in our mobile phones, right? I don't if you ask somebody 5 years back how many people will have touch phones or maybe touch related devices, I think all of us felt that it won't come in. People are going to have keyboards. It's going to be low. It's not going to cost is not going to come down. But dramatically, we've seen shifts which are much faster that can happen. So that is something to look forward to in terms of whether the shift is going to be fast enough. As a country, we are extremely large. Infrastructure needs are extremely high in some sense. So I truly believe it's going to be another 10 years. But the transformation and the narrative, the conversations, the advertisers ecosystem will have to shift eventually, because the population will change in what's happening. The second part, if you look at it, for digital advertising to become a force in itself, you're absolutely right that we are in a very early industry where everybody can report numbers and get through things. Again, this is the bane of a country like ours, is we need to set solid structures in place in terms of measurability and others, which can drive the ecosystem and the industry. We cannot live in amorphous or hidden data as a mechanism to address it. Again, this is something that $20 billion have moved in the US. $20 billion of a $70 billion industry moved. Move is because of bringing in the transparency, which is important for the industry. As a country, we need to start investing and putting those transparency elements in place, because we are trying to build a much larger industry. It is not about the next 1 or 2 years. It's about a decade that we need to look at. Those foundational elements are super important for us to do. I think it will have to happen. And again, it's a chicken and egg problem in our country in terms of, do we have enough advertisers? Do we have enough content, audiences? How do you kind of build it? But I'm quite an optimist that that will happen as well.
In the streaming area, new technologies like metaverse and Web3, which is going to change the internet to the advanced technology. How is the present position in streaming?
So today it is in the minds of technologists, and we are only showing some jazzy videos to consumers. So it is important that day when consumers start to experience it, sir, it's the only time when you will all understand whether how it's going. See, today we don't have devices, consumer devices. I don't think all of us want to put that clunky eyewear and then actually watch content. I don't think people, that is important for us. Is the customer or the consumers of content have to first start experiencing this before. Now today it's a castle in thin air to some extent. Again, we all love it. As technologists, we like to build technology for the future, but really the future is when the consumer starts to adopt it. So for me personally, how the whole consumer adoption starts is important. Today, I think we are putting the cart before the horse to some extent, or putting the technology elements in the future and excitement. It's all fine, but how are consumers going to experience it? Will it be immersive enough? I think those are the questions that we need to answer.
You brought investors in your company, right? My friend invested in you, Mr. Kamath, right?
Yes.
How was your experience with investors? Whatever you can share.
You want some juice or dope?
No, generally, I'm asking from a positive so that you can educate the audience. That's the only purpose.
I was kind of, I think, talking about that earlier. Primarily, I think, see, I've been very lucky to have really a good set of people that came along. And I was telling her that one of the things that we tell investors upfront, saying, hey, this is an uncertain journey for all of us. Be comfortable. And again, and we also recognize that they are in a business. So it's not like, it's not their money, they're putting somebody else's money. So it's important for us to understand that they are a business. There is expectations of the business that they're getting into. And a lot of things is all about trust eventually. Obviously with Rajesh Kamath, I've had a fantastic relationship. And again, we went through a lot of bad times. Not all our relationships are getting tested only in bad times. Good times are much more easier. So that was I think we've had a fantastic relationships across. And again, thankfully, these investors understood it, and hopefully, touch wood, they all had successful exits from a company standpoint. And that's been I think I'm happy for that.
And after the successful exits, you got even a bigger valuation. Yes, again. And some of them were reviewing that they should have stayed on longer.
Again, all of us.
In a good way,
All of us, there's a journey to go. I think somebody has to get
And
out.
I must tell you that some of them have invested in similar companies, hoping that they make those kind of returns.
Again, a lot of things is about being fortunate and lucky as well.
So you're being modest anyway.
Okay, so I have this very important question I have to ask you. Again, $1 billion question, but when you have disagreements at work with Vidya, where do you solve them at work, or do you carry them back home? And does one of you have to take a vacation? How do you balance work and life?
No, I think our relationship is slightly unique in some sense. And again, the reason is, again, we were friends and entrepreneurs first, and then spouses. And again, I tell a lot of people it was a marriage of convenience rather, because going out and figuring out another person is hard. So we said, okay, let's get married to some extent. Having said that, I think, again, for us, we've been entrepreneurs all our lives together, right? So startups are emotional bandwagon. It doesn't exit in your office door and then comes back. So pretty much our conversations are in the house and everywhere else is really about the company, what's happening, some crisis to solve, something has to happen. So I don't think we kind of get away from that. And in fact, maybe 90% of all our conversations, even in our whole lives would have been only about the company or something related to that rather than things. And the only time we get out of that is when we go vacations. Vacation is a time when we get mandatory stuff that we will not talk about the company and kind of take it as more spouses.
Lovely. And who wins most of these debates?
The women wins at home always, I guess.
Okay. Thank you, Baskar. So it was lovely speaking with you.
Thank you.
Please stay humble the way you've always been, the way we've always known you. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.